Hello and welcome to Her Story Conversations. We are happy to be back discussing something that is very close to our heart and, always at the top of our minds, to see more and more women populate the startup landscape in the country. This time, we have a stellar lineup of founders and investors to not only talk about the gender bias that exists in the startup space, but we will also hope, through the conversation to shine some light on the immense opportunity that exists and how we can build a vibrant and an all-inclusive startup ecosystem in India. It is my pleasure to invite this amazing group of women today from all parts of the world, actually. So it's my pleasure to invite Radhika Agarwal, investment team at Bloom Ventures. She's joining us from Delhi. Anubha Srivastava, founding partner at Strong Her Capital. She's joining us from London. Sana Vora, founder of Wedding Brigade, who's joining us from Manila, and Shakun Sethi, founder of Tickle.life, joining us from Jammu. Welcome all of you to Her Story Conversations, and thank you so much for taking time out. My first question goes to Radhika. Radhika, there have been, lot of many initiatives that a lot of funds, a lot of organizations, corporates as well, they have started initiatives that have been started to encourage, women entrepreneurship in the country. Many have been lip service, many have gone on to do other things. But you know what, you have started at Bloom Ventures, the Lead Tribe, that, from what I gather, hopes to achieve more than that. So just tell us, what was the genesis of this? Why did you think of starting this? And what do you aim to achieve out of this?
Yeah, thank you. I think first of all, thanks for having us, Deepthi. Appreciate this. Would love to share a little bit more about how we came up with Lead Tribes, just thinking through why the idea was born and how we shaped it up to what it is today. I think at Bloom, we've always been very aware of the massive gender gap both amongst VCs in India, globally in fact, and amongst the founder community. And this is something that we've been actively, so even within our hiring for the fund, we're very actively always trying to encourage more and more women to apply for roles. So when we did a slightly deeper study into why the funnel that applies to us even for startups is so skewed towards male founders than female founders, we asked around, we saw the same pattern with many other funds. I don't know if Anupha is seeing the same thing with her pipeline as well. We started speaking with female founders all the way from people aspiring to become founders to seasoned founders, growth founders, to understand why they think there aren't as many women actively pursuing entrepreneurship. And of course, reasons started all the way from like social structures are much harder. Not enough women go to IITs and IIMs, which kind of foster that entrepreneurial spirit a lot more. But I think one answer that came up very commonly as well was that they don't have as much of a network to kind of break into, which is where a lot of founders end up learning from, hiring from, partnering with. So this felt like a problem that as a fund, which also has our network of other VCs, of great role models like Sana, like Shakun, and other CXOs and subject matter experts who are willing to take out their time and help female founders, we can solve this problem fairly effectively, which is what the genesis of Lead Tribe came from. So the broad idea is to create a 10-week program for a cohort of 15 to 20 female founders that we think can really have the potential to build massive, great businesses, and take them through step by step the different modules of what it takes to build a business, all the way from like how do you hire a stellar team, to how do you fundraise, to how do you think of like marketing and branding, and in that process create a network for them that they can leverage for their entire entrepreneurial journey and keep learning even as we kind of step back. So kind of giving them that boost that they can use for their entire founding journey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Shakun, I'll just come to you as a founder. Uh, you know, uh, you have actually firsthand, you are there right at ground zero, and you are in the trenches, so to speak, seeing all this. What has been your experience when you have started out your company, and in terms of whether it is fundraising, whether it is building a team, whether it is talking to other people in the ecosystem? How has it been for you? if you could share us a little bit of your experience before we start on to this a little specifics.
Sure. For me, it has been very interesting because number one, the sector that Tickle.life is working in is something very new in India. It's into sex tech. And one of the reasons why we initiated this in North America was because of the uncomfortable responses that you get in India. Whether you talk about hiring, whether you even talk about finding a co-founder, whether you're talking to investors, whether you're even talking to angel investors, it's just like, it's very uncomfortable. They don't get it. And then most of the time, and if you're talking from being a woman's point of view, it was not very encouraging because it's just like, what they tell you is being a woman is difficult. Running a startup on top of it is even more difficult. And on top of that, you want to get into sex tech. Why do you want to dig your grave? Simple. So why don't you find, and I still remember the initial discussions that I had, this person just completely just told me like, you know what, I think you have it in you. This is not your first startup. You can do it. So why don't you do one thing? Get into something which is women centric. So I was like, what do you mean? Maybe get into cosmetic, maybe get into something which, like people resonate with, a woman would do and a woman would understand. If you're doing sex tech, don't do it. So it was very like discouraging. And it actually, gives you, it makes you feel bad and doubt yourself also. And then what you do is you just like go inside, you just sleep for a while and you just think what's happening. And then I just think you have to take a call. So we took a call, but it was discouraging. But thankfully enough, I did have my friend circle who are also from startup sector. So they just were like, if this is an experiment you want to do it. But I don't think so. Like a lot of people had confidence that whatever we were trying to do, we will be able to do it, which is positive as well, because then you can actually make the difference when nobody expects something out of you.
Yeah. So hold on to that thought. We'll come back to you soon. Anubha, you have been now, and not only in India, you're seeing what the trends are and what's happening in India, but as well, also you are based out of London, and you've seen the ecosystem in US very closely, in the UK, etc. I mean, what do you think? Is there a general gender bias everywhere, or is it specific to India? And as of course, the second question would be, as Shakun mentioned, right? Like women are expected to do a certain kind of startups. So as investors, what is it? What's your opinion about that, of course? And have you seen that play out? Like, okay, if you're a woman, maybe take a safe kind of bet.
Thanks, Deepti. So two very pertinent questions, I would say. So first of all, in answer to your first question, I think we talk about gender bias and we're talking about, we are all of Indian origin here. So our discussion may be more skewed towards India, but I can happily confirm that gender bias exists in all the same forms globally, as someone else mentioned before also. I think it was Radhika that, gender bias is a global problem. And, different. So our thesis is that, women are affected, of course, by where they live and the social structure of the places they live in, and the local nuances that go along with shaping who you are as a woman and what your consumption and production choices may be in your environment. But the truth is that while that is all very true, there are themes that we've noticed across the globe where women are suffering. So, for example, healthcare is a big area where women's health has been neglected globally, and it may have been neglected to a slightly different extent in the US versus the UK versus India. But I think the problem is a systemic problem across the globe. Another area is, why don't women continue in the workplace? So, first of all, why don't so many women in India? The interesting statistic which I found was that the highest unemployment ratio, female unemployment ratio, is in the women who have the highest education, so graduate level and above, right? And this is a marvelous statistic. So the thing is that, why is it that, first of all, women are not entering the workplace, and that might be driven by social structure, but once they enter the workplace, whether you're in the US or you're in the UK or in India, you know, women will quit after a few years, right? And so we've looked into that quite deeply as to why women don't stick out, and it's the usual reasons. It's, you know, the employer is not flexible, or the family needs are there, or whatever it is. Then another area is finance, right? So you look at finance for women all over the world, and they all have a similar problem. You know, savings, investing, bank account opening, insurance, you know, these are all on a very low scale for women, and it's true globally. So it turns out that gender bias, for whatever reason, you know, whether it's the state of the, and all societies are different, but it appears that there's a common thread running through gender bias problem globally. So you know, that's what we have noticed in our sort of experience, and that's what we believe is true. Now, your second question was, Deepti?
About the safe bet for women entrepreneurs. I mean, do investors?
Yeah. So women are expected to make the safe bets, and actually, it's discouraging. And I'm so happy to hear about Shakun's story. It's such an empowering story, and you know, and you say it, and you also tell it very well, Shakun. In that, you know, we women have to. So when I started out in my career, not to make this about me, but you know, in the late 90s, it was commonplace for a woman to be, you know, one out of two women in a conference of 100 men, 200 men, or whatever it was. And it funny thing was that women didn't actually protest a lot about this, right? We didn't actually speak up about it. We thought it was status quo, and oh God, we're so happy that we're at least one of the two women who are in this conference, right? So this is great. I've arrived, I've achieved everything. Now, women didn't speak up. Like Shakun tells her story today, and she tells it very well. And that's very empowering for all women to actually listen to and hear. And the fact that she says it with a smile on her face, that, you know, people didn't expect a lot out of me, and that's a challenge that I took upon myself. That kind of shows a resilience, which I think women, not a lot of women, carry through in their journey. So yes, you know, they make the usual choices around cosmetics or the more traditional sort of female entrepreneur thing. But now we are seeing, actually, to the credit of all the women entrepreneurs who are out there, they are coming out in so many different spaces, and they're getting at the forefront of technology, and they're using technology to create better solutions in finance or health or femtech or what have you for women. And I think that's changing, definitely.
Wonderful. We'll come back to you, Anubha. So we have another entrepreneur with us who's been resilient and who's been there, pounded the footpath, so to speak. Sana, she's joining us from Manila. So Sana, I think your mic is on mute. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, how has it been for you in this journey, being a woman entrepreneur, woman I put in quotes. I mean, there should be a time when we can just say entrepreneur and that's it. But how has it been for you, Sana?
So I think, unlike Shakun, the path I chose or the industry I chose is something that's traditionally very women-centric. I run a company called The Wedding Brigade, where we curate the very best wedding content, products, and services on one platform where you can buy and book everything you need basically for your wedding. And from that perspective, I think, there wasn't really ever a question about, do I understand the subject matter? Is this the right industry for me to get into? But I think the couple of things that I saw that I thought were interesting was that, one, it doesn't only just matter about whether I know the subject matter, it matters about whether the investor knows the subject matter. And so if I'm speaking to an investor who has not seen someone organize a wedding, a lot of times in India, it is the woman or the bride's family that will end up making most of the decisions. They then don't understand the stresses of planning a wedding, right? And so then it's harder for them to judge, is this solution really valuable? Does it make sense? Is this a big enough market? Is this a big enough stressor or pain point? And so that's been interesting, is that, do you have people on the other side of the table that understand what the problem really is, especially if that person is a man and it is a more traditional women-centric industry. And I think the other thing that I faced is something that's a little bit more common across all women. I think especially young women is like, when I was younger and single and you're looking for funding, a lot of times I would get asked, well, what would happen if you were to marry someone from a different city? What would happen if you were to have kids? What would happen if your in-laws don't allow you to work? And these are definitely not questions that any, technology CEO or, has been asked by any other investor if they are male, right? These are questions we get only if we are women, and they're considered normal. They're considered, perfectly reasonable questions to ask. And I know in the past it's definitely influenced certain people, because there are obviously back channels by which you get information where a different decision would have been made if, say, I was older or settled or a man. And so you do have these influences here and there, but I have also found great partners. I do have investors. Bloom is one of them. And I have found people who understand our journey, understand what we're trying to do. But the process is definitely harder, right? It's not going to be as easy as if you were looking at a more male-centric industry or talking to investors who understood the industry that, you were in.
True. So we've had this conversation, everybody has this conversation, every panel we talk about these things, but of course, when you talk separately to people, there are certain things which are off the record, and which I feel those off the record conversations are the real conversations. But having said that, there is this whole thing, are we not looking at success in a kind of a VC metric, right? A VC definition of success. What is success in this ecosystem? Is it about raising money? Is it about becoming a unicorn? Or is it about having a business, running it through your being profitable, having revenues, etc. So what do you think that we need to look at this whole definition of success beyond the VC definition?
So I think honestly, it really depends on whether or not you have VC partners or not, right? If you are an independent entrepreneur, you haven't taken on external capital, I think you should very much have the freedom to define success the way you choose, grow in the manner in which you choose. But I do think that when you do take on an external investor, there is a bit of compromise. You do need to have a shared vision. You do need to have shared targets in terms of growth. And so, yes, it's hard to take VC money and say, no, I'm going to define success on my own terms. I'll grow the way I want to. You just wait it out. And so I do think a little bit of compromise is necessary if you are taking capital.
Mm-hmm. Radhika, your viewpoint on this, like what are the conversations you are hearing from the women entrepreneurs that you're connected to and you hope to connect to through this Lead Tribe, right? How do we, should it be, of course, what Sana said is a point, right? If you are taking VC money, you have to, adhere to that sort of definition of success. But what are you hearing from women founders?
Yeah, so I think on the point of what class of capital to look at and how to then think of success metrics, fully agree with Sana that once you've taken VC money, then you're stuck on that. It's like a treadmill, right? Every 18 months you have to grow that 3x, 5x kind of number. You're signing up for that. I think what a lot of founders, not just female founders, but the ecosystem in general misses out on is that we're actually a very small asset class in the overall scheme of things, and there are many, many other ways of growing your business. And VC actually only fits a very specific kind of highly scalable, fast scalable business. So we really need to question whether VC is the best way forward for you. Interestingly, when we were speaking with the female founder ecosystem earlier, while they pointed out a whole set of challenges that I think are very unique to female founders, I did think that they were a little more open to non-VC funding. I think we get a lot of male founders that are not building quote unquote VC backable businesses. They're great businesses. They're just not on that same growth trajectory and speed. But they still want VC money. That's still a metric of success for them. For a lot of female founders, and I don't know if this is because they've just been so jaded by trying to fundraise and the fundraise process being harder for them, like Sana said, like Shakun said, But actually, I think they're far more self-aware that there are other ways to grow. So a lot of them have taken debt. So one of the questions in our application form also is, what form of capital do you plan to use to grow going forward? And that's not, we're only asking that question because then we want to bring in a speaker who can talk about that form of raising capital. And it's less than 50% have said VC money. And that's great because less than 50% of businesses actually do well with VC money. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah. Anubha, what do you think? I mean, what other ways are there to look at? You yourself are a VC and you are there in the thick of things. But how do you? What is the advice that you give to women founders, and also what other ways for them to look at capital, raising capital?
So I agree with a lot of comments that Radhika has just made. I think not every business model, I think it comes down at the end of the day to two things. One is the entrepreneur themselves and what their ambitions are, and personally what they want to do with their business and how fast they want to grow it, and where all do they want to go. And I have met a lot of female entrepreneurs who are very, very ambitious and are very clear about their ambition. And that's great. It's fantastic. They want to grow their businesses rapidly, and they think, VC is something that can help them along. On the other hand, I'm also I also work in mentoring younger businesses that are not ready for VC money as yet. And I've seen a lot of women in that setting who are kind of undecided, like Radhika said. They either they're undecided or they're open to different sources of capital. Now, the thing I usually find though is that is dependent. Sometimes I find it's dependent on their business, and then sometimes I'm perplexed because the business actually model can take off, and it can become a VC kind of model, but the entrepreneur themselves are either not interested or just not ambitious to pursue that route, but they have, they want to do it on a slower scale, and they want to do it in a less formal setting. So they don't want to be bound and restricted. I also find that in that role, I find a lot of women who are apprehensive of going to VCs. They don't fully understand the VC world, and they have obviously been told, and it's true, that raising money for VCs on any day is hard, even for a regular white guy. So forget it. If you are a woman, or heaven forbid, a woman of color, then that's going to be a really long, hard slog. So I think a lot of women are scared. They're just apprehensive. They're like, what is this, and how should I go about doing this? And then you literally have to handhold them. So I would say, yeah, it basically depends on the strength of your business model and the ambition as an entrepreneur. And then, this kind of negative press around VC doesn't help. So in the cases, a lot of women, if they're not going for a VC funding, they'll try to find other sort of sources of capital. They'll go to family offices, they'll try to go to foundations, they'll try to, depends on whatever their business is. But they're kind of, yeah, that's generally been my experience.
Shakun, you were also nodding your head when Radhika was talking about other venues of capital and not go the VC route. Tell us, what has been your experience in raising capital?
See, I'll tell you what happens is, like, I agree with everyone here, and that's the reason why I've just been nodding. So what happens is, women entrepreneur, and I hate using this term, like I had a chat with Dipti, that it's not women entrepreneurs, they're just entrepreneurs. We already somehow deep inside know that we do not have as many resources as anybody else would. So when you do not have resources, what is the best option? So instead of spending a lot of time running after VCs, even if we have the best tech, even if we have all the requirements, a lot of us, we just come with the thought process that, okay, we might not get it. So if we do not get it, why do we want to spend so much time on it? So what are the other options? And the best option is to make your business, to grow your business, and let inbound inquiry come to you. And which has happened. A lot of women entrepreneurs and their startups are growing, and people are interested. Like, even for us, people have started coming in, showing interest. So I think it's also, it's about finding the best part. And like when Radhika said that a lot of men entrepreneurs, they just start thinking that, okay, I'll raise the fund and then I'm going to do, or, so it's just very different with how women think. Women already are ready that we have to struggle. So we have to struggle, might as well struggle where we will get an outcome rather than struggle where we might get and we might not get. So yeah.
There's this other thing that a lot of women entrepreneurs are advised to get a male co-founder, right? It could be a tech for the tech, because of course there's this general impression that women do not understand tech, and hence they need a person who is there as a co-founder. Shakun, you had to take a co-founder, right? A male co-founder. Just tell us a little bit about that and how has that panned out for you? And of course, what sort of undercurrents of biases do you see play out?
See, when I took in a co-founder, I was not thinking about whether I want a man or a woman. It was just who has the capability and who can actually get, because at the end of the day, I have to take care of myself. So it was not that. And I did discuss this. On the contrary, I was discouraged from having a co-founder who was man. A lot of people wanted me to have another woman, because then there are a lot of other funds which are specifically created for people who are under the assumption that it would be easier to at least get those funds. So it was never about whether you should go for a man or a woman. It was just like, you should go for a woman. And maybe I would have, if I would have found the right one, because we were not thinking from a gender point of view. It was all about the capability. Interestingly enough, there are so many biases which you would not even understand. Like when we wake up in the morning, we are not thinking like, oh, I'm a woman and I have to do it like this. We just think like, oh, it's morning and we have to work.
Yeah.
But when you go to the office, and there are people who have come, and we all have come from a patriarchal society, they just have a bend towards the man. The man might be able to handle situations which a woman would not. A woman would be really good with EQ-centric problems. A woman would be very good with marketing. A woman would be very good with, talking to someone. But maybe she would not be good enough, for crisis. Or maybe when I need something, very specific, maybe she would not be good, So personally, I've seen those issues cropping up, and we did have a chat, me and my co-founder, hey, what's happening? How do we handle it? How do we resolve it? So we do make it a point that we do have a lot of team building exercises to make everybody understand that, everybody is equal. A few days back, we were trending on Yahoo. And after that, we started getting a lot of messages on our open chat from people. And we all knew that what's going to happen is there would be a lot of derogatory messages as well, just because the sector that we are in. So we made it a point that everybody gets to see what's happening. So whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whether you're a person who does not identify as any of those, you have to go through it, you have to check it out, so that we start sensitizing them. That irrespective of who you are, everybody has to go through things. So there is an undercurrent, but it's also about, finding the right people. And that's what I've been learning from all the people that I've been meeting, that what matters is a team, and a team can't be built thinking about gender. And if they're thinking about gender, then they're not the right people.
Sana, my question to you would be about this, about, building a team. That's the next second most important, work, so to speak, for the founder after, that there's capital. What was the challenges that you faced, when you were building your team?
So some challenges I think were age and experience related, while others maybe were more gender related. When I started off, when we raised our first round, I think I was 26, and I moved from the US. I hadn't worked in India before, didn't have a big network. We just sort of started. We had a bit of a growing presence on social media. So for people who are interested on the content front or the e-commerce front, we had a little bit of a name, but when hiring in tech and ops, we really didn't have much brand value, so to speak, at that point. And so I think that was one challenge, right? Proving that, you should come and work for me. I am reliable. I can get us through tough times. It's a volatile industry. It's volatile being an early stage startup, but I will be able to guide us through. I think that was something that I had to prove. And that honestly was a little bit more, I think, age and experience related. The second part, I think, in terms of like being a entrepreneur who is a woman and leading a team where there are both women and men, is that sometimes I've realized, especially when comparing my behavior to people I worked for in the past who were male, is that I cannot behave in the same manner or necessarily have the same leadership style and have it be interpreted in the same way. There is a different interpretation depending on who is conveying the message. If I am funny, if I am a bit relaxed, if I crack a joke, it is perceived in a different way, and understanding that difference in perception and really tuning myself a little bit, right, to make sure that I'm behaving in a way and I'm leading in a way where I am, producing the best results, creating a strong team, creating cohesiveness. A lot more thought, I feel, goes into that for entrepreneurs who are women versus entrepreneurs who are not, because there are a lot of inherent biases.
Mhm. Anubha, you said you do mentor, early stage founders and women founders at that. What would you tell them about building a team and about what Shakun and Sana were sharing about overcoming those challenges?
I would go with what Shakun said, which was that, you want to build a team, and that's what I tell them. You want to build a team based on experience and relevant experience rather than going for a gender. So, I mean, that just is common sense, there's nothing else to it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women have had these problems where they've been told to go get a co-founder who is male. I think they've had problems where they have had a co-founder who's male because he was best suited for the job. And then the co-founder got visibly better treatment in meetings with VCs than they did. And they came out of it saying, well, I wasn't really treated like the CEO. I was just treated like someone who was carrying the laptop around. And this I'm talking about, companies here in the UK and, senior women who've been in the industry for a long time and transition to becoming entrepreneurs. And then get really ill-treated when they go to meet with VCs who tend to, condescend to them and talk down to them or ignore them completely and talk to their colleagues who are male. So I think, as Sana said, there's lots and lots of inherent biases in the system. Both Shakun and Sana said there are lots of inherent biases. The thing is that, I guess the system is just broken, right? The ecosystem to raise capital for women today is not in place. We are putting it in place brick by brick by all the work that's being done by all the various players in this ecosystem. But I feel like there's several elements that are missing. Prejudices and biases will only change with time as more and more companies that are women-led become successful and they can show the returns. Unfortunately, it's going to be quite a long and a hard road for women entrepreneurs because, we'll have to, again, one more time, you have to kind of prove yourself before you're given any sort of credit to be given a seat at the table. But I think we make a change, one step at a time and hire the best talent.
The other point that is often discussed in when we talk about encouraging women entrepreneurship is the lack of networking or the lack of women talking about themselves, the lack of for the better, whether it is on social media, whether it is talking to other people, talking about yourself, right? Radhika, what would you say? I mean, as in the Lead Tribe or otherwise also the women founders that you talk to, what sort of conversations come up there, and what sort of advice do you give them as far as talking about themselves is concerned? Is there a type? So for my question, I think to just put it simply, is there a type that people expect a woman entrepreneur to be?
I don't know. There's a type that I think I'm the wrong person to ask. If there is a type, I think that's a very, very person specific, investor specific. I'm sure people have, yeah. I'm sure there'll be people who expect us to be docile. There'll be people who expect us to be overly friendly. There'll always be these certain perceptions people come with. But yeah, I mean, I think the way we've seen female founders, especially the more early stages when they're still like just starting up, build their networks and reach out is very, very different than with men. So I think the starting point itself is very different. You have fewer of those college networks. There is, of course, it's undeniable that there is a bit of a boys' club all around, whether it's a college specific thing or an MBA specific thing, or even like a more product in Bangalore kind of space. There are these boys clubs that exist, and it is harder for women to break into them. I think that is one. I think the second is also on us. I think we're much more constrained in sending out cold reach outs on both on Twitter, on LinkedIn, even on email. I think in a week, and I'm sure this is true with most VCs, I get maybe about 10 just cold emails with pitches. In a month, maybe one will be from a female founder. That's a very, very messed up ratio. And that's after me speaking a lot on social media about, being open to speak with female founders. So I think that there is a massive gap there. So I think and I see that with myself as well. I don't think I am as good as like cold reach outs as I'm sure many of my peers are. And some of that comes from just apprehension, fear, and a lot of those barriers need to be broken. And at least for me, so far, what's been a very good way to do that has been some sort of a peer role model, or maybe a female senior VC who have seen do things differently and have kind of learned how they do things. So I think the one thing that we're also hoping to do is form some of those role models that are not just great male founders. And sure, we'd love to kind of tap into their expertise and help female founders learn. But I think is to actually have good female mentors and basically saying that this is not just a man's world. Women can do this just as well or better than men can.
Sana, you were saying something.
I was going to jump in on the type because that's something that I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about. The day if I'm meeting a VC, the day I'm meeting them in the morning, I maybe spend 20 more minutes thinking about what to wear than I would on a regular day because I am so concerned about my appearance. I don't want to appear too feminine. I want to appear polished, but not that I put in too much effort so that they think that I only care about how I dress or how I look. And you see this across politics, you see this across business, right? A lot of women really play down their femininity because it's almost as if that if you look a certain way or you have an interest in fashion, you wear makeup, then you couldn't possibly care enough about your business. And I used to play into that. And now I've sort of made a conscious effort that, okay, even if I'm on this panel, we're talking about feminism and sexism and tech, but I still was like, no, Sana, you can wear a dress, you can wear earrings, and that doesn't delegitimize in any way what you have to say. And so I do think there's a little bit of a type, and I myself have been guilty for playing into it at times.
I have to add, the reverse has also happened to me. So when I first started doing like pitch calls, I used to have a lot of founders come, not all of course, but a couple of founders used to come and say, oh, so who from Bloom is joining? And I say, well, I've joined. Unless I'm invisible, I'm here. So I actually started thinking maybe I shouldn't tie my hair because I look like a child when I do. So I've also been through all these things of like, how do I not look like not the person that they're here to talk to?
Yeah. Shakun, you also have a story behind this, the type.
It's actually, so I'm very comfortable being feminine, but then in past few months, I've been told on multiple calls, because that's how we are communicating with all the people, that you're too feminine.
There's such a thing as too feminine. Okay.
And you should just completely be confident enough in what you're doing. You don't come across as you're too confident. And my question is always that I'm as it is doing something so difficult and I'm using I, me, we, how should I own it? Like, what is the other way of owning it? Should I just, bring in a husky voice? Do I have to keep on cutting you in between? Do I not have to listen to you? Like, what am I supposed to do? Because that's who I am. And it's not as if like I've just started making calls and I'm just like, this is not my first call in my life. So it's very interesting that how people are perceived, how a lot of, I had a colleague And while she was leaving, because it wasn't working out, she actually gave me this advice. And the reason why it was not working out was she came across as very strong for the entire team. So the team was not very comfortable. And while she was leaving, she just told me one thing: Shakun, you're too sweet. And I was like, what do you mean by being too sweet? She said, see, you're too sweet, you're listening to people. And until unless you won't put your foot down, how men do it, you will not succeed. So it's actually a struggle. Do you need to leave your femininity? Do you need to become more masculine? What do you need to do? And I think not a lot of men would have this issue, or they would not be thinking about it. So yeah, so that's been
There's something that I came across the other day. I think New Yorker had it, or one of the cartoons that I read was a difference between being aggressive and being assertive. So the other person says it's the gender.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So Anubha, you mentioned about finding a place on the table, but is it possible that, like, maybe we are not looking for a place on the table? Maybe we have a different table altogether. We make our own table. Is that something that one can look at?
I think that day will come, Deepti, when we make our own table, but I don't think it is this day. So you see, to get to the other table, to make your own table and to make it a very successful table, there have to be, I think, enough successes in the ecosystem. There has to be enough belief in the ecosystem about women-led companies and women entrepreneurs. Yes, this women term is actually a bit annoying, but about women-led companies and women entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, the way the world is structured today is that in the UK, only 13% of top institutional investors are women. I think in VC, it's even lower. I think it's 8% of top VC women. And I haven't looked at, what constitutes top. I'm imagining those are decision makers, but 8% seems like quite a big number to me. So it turns out that there are not enough decision makers in that role. Then if you look at the women entrepreneurs, there are more and more coming up every day, and they are wonderful business ideas. But as we know, that funnel is still much smaller than the funnel which sees, the usual guy step up and think that he can create a company, even though he may or may not have a good idea, right? Because women tend to make sure that they have an idea, they've fully researched it, they want to go out, they want to impress. And they are not superficial in a lot of their thinking. If a woman steps out to raise a company, that she has put a lot of effort and thought. That's what I usually find, that women have put a lot of effort and thought. But the thing is that when they get out to raise the company, they need to have, as we have discussed, a mentor network, which doesn't exist in a big number today. So for example, what Bloom is doing, this is going to help women in a big way, right? Then when they get to the next step, if you mentor them through the very early stages before they actually get to VC, then they have to get to raise VC fundraising. Now, at that stage, they're facing all these institutional biases of the decision makers who are actually making the decision to give them the money. But even during that process, I see women getting fatigued. They're getting tired. They lose their resilience. They kind of, they get overwhelmed with all the negative feedback that they get. So it's important to actually be able to raise the VC fund, but then it's also important to know that, you will fail or things won't go your way and you keep going, right? For some reason, I find that the guys I worked with in the past, the male founders, they seem to have abundance of these qualities. And I'm not really sure where they draw it from, because, a lot of them just go on to fail and basically not raise great businesses. So I'm not really sure. It's a personality thing, right? And also there's the ecosystem supports them. They have a lot of things in place, like networking, mentors, other guys who pull them along. They have a lot of things in place. So a short answer to your question would be, yes, I do think we should create a different table one day, and there will be a different table for women. And, there won't be this idea of woman entrepreneur. We'll just be entrepreneurs who will be doing things. But I think that that's a few years away, to be honest. If you look at, how many things need to change, and the numbers really need to change in terms of the decision makers and their behaviors before we can have that table.
Wonderful. On that note, I think we're just out of time now. But however, I think we need to talk more about the fact, Anuba, and like maybe next time again, we'd like to invite you, is why aren't there more women VCs, right? For instance, why aren't there more women? And particularly your journey, how it was, how did you become one, right? And the other thing that you talked about was that how to create that own table and like, so definitely there's more to talk about on this. And thank you so much, Radhika, Anubha, Shakun, and Sana for giving us this time. And thank you so much.